This is a quick look at how to read the Final Fantasy V Algorithms Guide, published by Instructortrepe J.L. Tseng. That's what they go by. All the way back in 2004. This has been on GameFAQs since then, and it is kind of the most important piece of work that a lot of dedicated Final Fantasy V players use. Now, this is going to be good for any games you're playing on the Super NES or Super Famicom version, the PlayStation 1 version, and it's also pretty useful on the GBA version. There's a couple of small changes to some of the things in the GBA version, so some of the formulas have changed a little bit, and some of the bugs have been fixed a little bit in the GBA version. The mobile or Steam version does not work as well with this because they changed a lot of things. A lot of monsters, they've changed resistances, they've changed how a lot of things work, and as far as I know, as the time of this recording, dedicated players are still kind of figuring out those differences. Hackers are still working to kind of get to the bottom and crack that game open. This does use all of the Super NES fan-translated terms and names for things, so if you're playing on the GBA version, you may have to work a little bit harder to find some of the things that you are looking for, because they may go by different names. Same thing with the PlayStation 1 translation. It doesn't have a nice version translation difference like the Final Fantasy 1 guide by Astral Esper does. That may be something that in the future we could work on this, to have all of the names consistent in all of the ways that we can find them. So when you look for it on GameFAQs, just look for Final Fantasy V Algorithms Guide. You'll find this one by Instructortrepe, uploaded 11/24/04, and still good today. The way I like to read this is in a Chrome browser. You can, of course, use any text document editor that you'd like. I like the Chrome browser because of the very fast search parameters you can use. It seems to work better than the basic Windows text editor that you can find, because you can kind of bounce around a little bit. So your Control F or your Apple F will open that in your Chrome browser, and you can find things using the table of contents. So if I want to look for your hit determination for various types of attacks, I know that that is going to be 6.2, and if you already used documents like this, then you can skip ahead a little bit. 6.2, that gets me back there. Okay, and I can go back to the table of contents just with 1, because I saw there was a 1 and the apostrophe, or sorry, the closed parenthesis right there, closed parentheses right there. So if you want to find anything on here, it's very well indexed with searchable terms. So for example, if I just picked up the Rune Axe for my Berserker, and I want to figure out how my Rune Axe works, you can just find the Rune Axe. Its attack is 71. The plus 10 for 5 MP has to do with the rune parameters. The hit percent is 90, so if you want to figure out how your hit percent works, remember you could go back up to that 6.1 and figure out how to calculate hit percent and how to use this number to figure out how accurate it really is versus enemies with some evasion. If you use it for Goblin Punch or Throw, it gives the value of the attack right there. If you want to figure out that kind of formula, you can go back and calculate that by searching these terms. Price for sell. Attack category, generally it's physical. This one actually is listed as a black magic attack, which is very interesting. Thor's hammer is an aerial attack. Some enemies have responses to different kinds of attacks. The strong versus, if there is like a creature type, like if the beast killer bow or beast killer whip is strong against beasts or creatures or avis or human or whatever, man-eater, strong versus human. Stats, this is the stat adjustment, double grip, okay. Jobs equipable, this one's just Berserker, and of course Freelancer you can use as well. If I want to figure out how this Rune Axe damage things work, I can go to the damage formula, 3C, and I can go find my 3C attack type. Okay, so hit percent is the weapon hit percent. Remember that was 90. Evade percent is the target of 8%. So these are the steps that it follows. So when you have something like this, it has steps that the game takes. It figures out the hit percent and the evade percent. It goes for a hit determination for physical attack steps, and if you want to find those are back there. Uses axe damage parameters, and here it lists them below. Weapon attack over 2 plus a random number between 0 and weapon attack. Whenever you see the 2 dots right there, that means it generates a random number. So this one, the Rune Axe was 71. So it divides 71 by 2. That would probably be, they'd make that 35 because everything's rounded down. 35 plus a random number between 0 and 71. So basically what it means is between 50% and 150% of the listed value. The multiplier is your level times your strength divided by 128, and then you round that down, and then you add 2 to it. Defense is the target's defense divided by 4, because axes have that special property of quartering the defense of the target. There's more on that in the damage parameters section of this if you want a little bit more about how all of those works. Each weapon family kind of has its own way to get your multiplier. So it takes if you get a hit, it rolls this random number for the attack value and then subtracts the enemy defense and then multiplies it by this value right here, your character level times your strength stat divided by 128 plus 2. Okay, I'm imagining that most Fiesta players are going to use this to figure out how to beat monsters or bosses. So let's take a look at the bosses. Let me actually use that to find the real 11.2 is what we need. There we go. Okay, so there is a little note here about how to read the AI script, and I'll kind of walk you through it, but you can read this at your leisure, and you can see how all of this stuff works. But we'll look at things like this. If you're just patient with it, it can help you with it. These are conditions, so it checks for conditional things. If it doesn't find them, then it goes down to the next thing. These are reactions, so if it finds something, then it will do it. So react to physical attack, let's say. This is what it will do when it gets a physical attack. That's all of that works. No interrupt is something that we'll see. That means that it does this, then the next thing, then the next thing, then the next thing, until the close of the bracket there. So whatever is between the no interrupt, it does all of those commands. And we'll see that as we go through. And unhide monster is kind of like summoning, which we'll also see. Okay, unhide means like those monsters are there, but they're not really in the battle until they're summoned. All right, so let's take a look at a basic monster. This is the Goblin, and this is kind of the template for any enemy, including bosses. Gives you the name. Again, these are the Super NES fans translation names. Level, this is important for knowing if it's going to be hit by like level 5 death or whatever. Hit points, MP, experience gained, gil gained. Okay, now its speed is how it's calculated for the ATB. So it's kind of like its agility, and the enemies have their own speed calculation that you can find if you want to calculate how many actions an enemy will get as compared to your actions. And most Fiesta parties do not need any kind of number crunching that tight. But if you're doing some single class challenges, or if you're doing like a single time mage, you're going to be working with that speed stat a lot. This is their attack and their attack multiplier. So their attack value is 5. Their attack multiplier is 1. So if they take their attack, subtract your defense, and then multiply it by 1, and that's their attack value. Okay, so they have pretty basic attack. You've got their elemental things. They have 0 defense and 0 evade. Magic multiplier, if they're to cast spells, they get magic multiplier 4. So the attack value of any spells that they cast is going to be 4. Magic evade, that's for statuses and things, and then magic defense, that's for damage spells. Elemental immunity, status immunity, dead. So goblins actually are immune to instant death status. That's interesting. But all the other statuses are on the table. They absorb no elephants. These are some can't evade things that we'll see with that a little later on. Elemental weaknesses, creature type, that's if they were like a human or a dragon or a bird, and they had like strong verses on the weapon type, which you saw before. Immunity, initial status. Some monsters start with an initial status, like some are in regen or wall or protect status. Omega starts in stop status, which is interesting. Stop wears off very quickly, but it's a way to keep Omega from just like having a turn right away. Specialty is a critical attack, and the specialty effect is 1.5 times damage. They can use Goblin Punch. This is any spells that they have in their command list, but not necessarily in the script. If you control them, tells you what to do. Any blue magic spells they have, Goblin Punch. And this is the catch and release thing for that monster. So all that stuff is listed right there. This is their drop and their steal. So drop, their normal drop is nothing. Their rare drop is a leather helmet. Then their common steal is potion. Their rare steal is nothing. Now, this is the last thing listed on there, and that's their AI script. This Goblin has a very simple AI script, and every single round it will just take a look at this. And when you see within brackets, it's usually in groups of 3, that means that it chooses one of these things randomly based on an RNG calculation. So when it gets to its script, it will look at itself and say, okay, here's what I get to do. I'm going to fight, or Goblin Punch. So 2/3 of the time it will fight, 1/3 of the time it will Goblin Punch, and every single round of combat, it will come back and do that over and over and over and over again. Okay? That's the simplest enemy we have. But now let's start taking a look at some bosses. Let's take a look at Siren. Let's take a look at Siren. I know you know what all this stuff means. You can find all of that stuff on yourself. But let's look. These are some of the things she's immune to. All that stuff you can find. Heavy type is usually applied to a lot of bosses, and it gives them kind of automatic immunity to a bunch of things like percentage-based damage spells and a lot of other stuff like that. These are the spells in her spell list, but again, that's not her AI script. Sometimes they'll have spells that aren't in their AI script. So this is some spells you can have them cast on you or use when they're controlled or confused. Here's her AI script. First round, she will do mute, slow, or haste, and 1/3 chance to do either. So you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting any of these spells. Second round will be one of these, cure, ice, or scan. Again, equal chance to do any of those 3. Her third action is armor, sleep, or bolt. Okay, so she'll take this action, then this action, then this action, but not all of those things, right? So if she can do mute, ice, then sleep, or she could do haste, scan, then armor, or any combination of the other things. Her fourth action will be no interrupt. Both of these things. It will display the text, changes to an undead. So that's actually the monster displaying that text. And then immediately after that, remember this is no interrupt, it unhides the monster, Siren's second form, and then it ends. That bracket is the end. Okay? And so Siren's second form has a totally different set. They do share hit points. Of course. So totally separate set. And this is the specialty Bear Hug, one of my favorites. Specialty effect adds poison. So it's like an attack that adds poison with her normal attack value. Okay, so AI script is fight, Bear Hug, or fight. So 2/3 chance to use fight and 1/3 chance to use Bear Hug. Second action will be fight, Bear Hug, or fight. Third action is fight, Bear Hug, Bear Hug. So 2/3 chance to use Bear Hug in this one. And then on the fourth action, it unhides Siren first form. Okay? So you can use this to your advantage by timing out your actions during the Siren fight, knowing that she'll take 3 actions, and her fourth action will be to switch monsters. And then this one will take 3 actions, and its fourth action will be to switch monsters. Okay? Let's take a look while we're here at Medusa and Forza. Forza is actually listed earlier in the game than Medusa in the code. So look at Medusa first. Now Medusa, all of this stuff that we've seen before, she has a conditional thing. So the game first checks for conditions. Okay? The V00 equals 00, that's just a variable thing. So whenever you're fighting most enemies or bosses, that V is equal 0, because most things don't have conditional things, but some bosses will change that V number, and then that will branch out their AI script. Okay? So she doesn't change this until later. So here's how it works. The first thing the game does is it checks to see if V is 0 and her hit points are less than 300, it will do this stuff. But if her hit points are greater than 300, it skips this part it skips all this, and it jumps down to her regular routine. So she will cast Fire, Ice, or Bolt, not in that order, of course. Remember, she'll do one of these three, then one of these three, one of these three. And looks like her specialty is critical as a critical attack. So arrow, specialty, or drain. Okay? And then after this, it will revert back up here. So she will keep casting one of these, then 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 one of these, until her turn gets to, oops, I'm checking and I am under 300. I am under 300. So if she's under 300, she will, no interrupt, display the text, Medusa, honey, I have a job for you, then unhide that monster, Forza. Okay? Her next action will be no interrupt, change target, single enemy, not self, regen. So she will change her target to target Forza. Is what that means? So a single, it's actually her party member, not your party member. So another single enemy, but it's only Forza, not self. So it will skip herself, go to Forza, and it will cast regen, and then it sets the variable number to 1. And what that means is that she won't continually try to summon Forza, that it can only happen once. So V00 equals 1. Her hit points can still be below 300, and then she won't have to keep summoning a monster that's already there. Okay, so that's how the conditional and the variable stuff works. Now, that's why you can skip the Forza phase by breaking that ice rod on her, because she only has 650 hit points. You can deal more damage than that and get her past that, because she has to get a turn with her hit points less than 300 for her to summon Forza. Okay, let's look at some reactions, some fun reaction things you can find. Let's look for Machine Head. Okay, let's look for Machine Head. This is an enemy that you fight later on. And it's got all the monster stats, which you can find all the way through. It has some conditional stuff. Condition, status, butts, jumping. It will change its target to butts, and it will use the move Interceptor Rocket. If anyone has ever tried to jump on a Machine Head enemy, it has a special rocket that damages the jumper and will pull them back down to Earth. And if you want to see what that does, you can always just find that. You can go back to the attack type, Hex 65, Interceptor Rocket. If the attack is not jumping, the attack misses, do not fail any more steps, or causes target to abort their jumping attack. Okay, so if you want to find that, you can always go back there. Now we'll go back to Machine Head, and we're right back where we were. So there's an example of jumping around if you want to see how all that stuff works. Okay, otherwise he has one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these, then fight, and then back to the beginning. But if it checks any of those conditions, then that's how it's going to handle that. Okay, let's look at a couple more enemies here with some fun stuff. Halicarnassus. It has kind of a curious AI routine. Its AI script is as follows. If the condition is 1, V equals 1, it goes to basically its normal routine. But if it's not, it will set it to 1, change the target to the whole party, or just target your whole party, and it uses Kurururu. Okay, so first thing that Halicarnassus actually does in its first action is to set the V to 1. It starts at 0. Its first action is to set it to 1. Then it casts Kurururu. Okay? And then the next time it comes around, it goes into its normal routine. So that's how the programmers got it to start with Kurururu and then not have Kurururu repeat in its normal routine. Fight, dynamo, or specialty, fight, dispel, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Then just before it goes to holy, it sets the V back to 0 and then uses holy. And then it can go back to using the beginning stuff where it changes it to 1, kururu again. So that's how it cycles back through. This also has a react to any summon magic. So if you cast any summon spell on Halicarnassus, it will say focusing power. This change music proc is something that JL Tseng found in there, but it doesn't appear to function. So whenever he puts the double question mark on there, that means it's something that the author of this didn't quite understand. It was a command that the author found, but doesn't seem to do much. And then strong fight. Now, strong fight has its own parameters, and that just does that massive damage. So anytime you have a reaction thing, when something happens, it will react and it will do whatever's inside there, inside of these brackets. So it doesn't actually eat up a turn. Okay, let's go on. Apokolips. This is also Azul Magia, and this guy has one of the most crazy routines in the game, and they do that because they want him to be a blue mage that can learn spells from you. It can learn spells from you, so it reacts to having blue spells cast on it by changing the V number. So you can see first the game checks all these V numbers. Every time it gets a turn, it checks all these Vs, like, oh, is it this? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 7? Okay, if it's not any of those, then Azul Magia goes into its normal routine. Dark Shock, Guard Off, Mind Blast. These are all blue spells, or almost all blue spells that it uses. If you cast one of the blue spells on it, it will set the V number to use that spell on you. So, for example, if you cast Exploder on him, it will say Learned Exploder, and it sets the V to 7, and then does nothing, and then that ends that one. So the nothing just kind of finishes up that routine. But the next time it comes around and gets a turn, the V will be 7, so then he will cast Exploder. So one of the cheap ways to beat Azul Magia or Apokolips is to use Exploder on him with one of your characters. His next action, he will use Exploder back at you, and he will die. He'll kill himself. Okay? This is an interesting one. Twin Taenia has 2 forms that are actually 2 separate monsters. And I wanted to point this out because this is the way that we beat this thing, and the way the game works behind it is really quite clever. So it has its normal AI script, 1, 2, and then it changes target, and then 3, and it goes to Unhide Monster Twin Taenia on its next form. If you physical attack it, it will do either Tidal Wave or 2/3 of nothing. So that's how they make physical or reactions not always happen, is by having a 1/3 chance to do Tidal Wave, 2/3 chance to do nothing. If you cast magic on it, it has 1/3 chance to counter with Mega Flare, 2/3 chance to do nothing. And that includes bouncing Mind Blast back at it, by the way. If it does Mind Blast back at you, it bounces to itself, then it bounces a Mega Flare off of you onto itself. Kind of funny. But when it unhides Monster Twin Taenia's second form, it changes all of its stats. As you can see, it's a totally different monster, even though it doesn't look like it on the screen. It's a totally different monster with a level that's divisible by 5, and with a whole bunch of weaknesses. Weakness to Holy. Suddenly it's lost a lot of its status immunities, like to instant death or to stone, and that's what most parties do, is they will kill it during the charging for Giga Flare. Its speed is 81. Now, the speed of the previous form is only 35, which is a massive difference. This is actually the fastest, I believe, enemy in the game. And they do that because they want it to they want it to get through its routine quickly. So it will spend a turn displaying the text, it will spend a turn doing nothing, and then it will cast Giga Flare, and then it will unhide the first form of Twin Taenia. But its speed is so high that it does this really quickly. It says charging up for Giga Flare, and then really very, very, very quickly, it skips the nothing round and then does the Giga Flare. But it doesn't have any reactions, though. It doesn't have any reactions like the first part does, but then it unhides the first form. Okay? Now, let's jump to the very last one that we're going to look at, and that's Neo X Death. Now, this one, for some reason, lists it as X-Death, so you can't actually search for it with EX, D-E-A-T-H. This has all 4 parts of Neo X Death. Part 1 is actually the top piece, not the physical piece. This is the Grand Cross piece, is part 1. And here's the AI script of this one. You can look at all of the other stats of him on your own. You can look up the magic spells, everything on your own. Condition, question mark, question mark, question mark. That's condition alone is kind of what we think about this. It's condition when it's the only enemy on the screen. That's when it goes into this. We call this like its desperation mode or its berserk mode or whatever. It's critical mode. Where it will do no interrupt, one of these three, then one of these three. And then the next turn, it'll do one of these three and then one of these three, but it does 2 actions each round. And then one of these, one of these. So this is why the critical mode of any of these parts of Neo X-Death is very, very, very dangerous. And then our normal routine on it is when it's just got its regular nothing, when it checks all these conditions, and that V has to get set to 1 for it to get into that last one. And I think it sets that itself. So its regular routine is down here. That's why it's kind of hard to read sometimes, because it checks all the conditional stuff first. So the Grand Cross piece will do nothing for a turn. Then it displays the text. Then it spends a turn doing nothing. And then it casts Grand Cross. And then it spends a turn doing nothing, nothing, dispel, nothing. So the first Grand Cross comes rather quickly, but then the next Grand Cross will take a little while. Okay, because it'll do Grand Cross on action 1, 2, 3, 4. And then action 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So action 4 and action 12 will be Grand Cross. But it's always checking its conditions. And if it's in condition less than 30,000, but greater than 15,000, it will start doing Grand Cross more often. It'll do Grand Cross on action 3 and then work its way back down. Okay? And then if it's at 15,000, it does Laws of Physics Are Broken, Grand Cross, and then set V to 1. And that's where we get into the most dangerous part on that. That's why when I say I'm fighting it, when you get it below 15,000, it will do 1 more Grand Cross, and then it goes into a very dangerous mode where it will fight, and then it can use Meteo. Okay, and that's not its critical mode that when it's alone. That's just the once it's weak and starts getting nasty. Part 2, this is the Almagest piece. This one's very simple. It has its own critical mode right here when it's alone. That's the condition alone. But then it does nothing for 1 action, Almagest, and then nothing, 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 Almagest, nothing, nothing. It does nothing else except this. This over and over and over and over again. And it will just do Almagest on you forever until, if it's alone, then it starts doing all kinds of nasties. Part 3 is what we call the physical part of X-Death. The physical part of X-Death, and its regular routine is this. Fight vacuum waves, its specialty is vacuum wave, or do nothing. Fight fighter vacuum wave, fight vacuum wave, or dispel. So when you see dispels popping out, and then it has its critical mode. But it does not have anything that changes with its HP value like the Grand Cross part does. And then this is the back piece down here. Part 4 is the back piece. And this is what we think of as the magic piece, because it will do one of these 3. But sometimes it will fight. A lot of people think that we call it the magic piece, so it must only ever do magic, but it does have fight. And it does have vacuum wave worked in there. So all of this magic stuff comes from it, but sometimes you'll get 2 fights in a row, and people will wonder, well, how did it get 2 fights in a row? And that's just because the front piece and this one both got fight very quickly. And then it has its own critical mode. But this is where you can look at, it does not have creature type heavy, does not have heavy right here. And it does, so that's why the Odin spell from the Magic Lamp can use the True Edge, that Zantetsuken ability, and take that one out. That's how that works. So that is a preliminary, although rather long, look at how to read the algorithms guide in terms of finding ways to beat your bosses and your enemies. If you have questions on this, feel free to let me know or let anyone else in the community know. You leave a comment on the video here. Get in touch with me on Twitter, where I'm also active_ATE, or you can pop over to the Final Fantasy V 4 Job Fiesta subreddit, where people will be very, very happy to help you out. The more you work with this guide, the less weird it seems to work with it, and eventually becomes so smooth that you can use it to find everything that you need. And a lot of us who know a lot about the game really know a lot about the game because of this guide, and we use this guide all the time. I don't have everything memorized, and a lot of players don't have this whole guide memorized, but we just keep the tab with it open when we're playing, and we can use the search tools to find what we need. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you all enjoy your Final Fantasy V 4-Job Fiesta or other challenge runs you're working on. There's a lot of stuff going on with this game, and we all have a great time with it. We will see you next time.